for the answers. And then so we have 2 hours, but with 11 speakers, we would like to hear great variety of responses. But because you ask for the time, so you will be the first, and Alberto, you will set the standard. Big responsibility for you.
I usually keep my time allotment.
I will, yes, I can show you. I will try to keep, I don't want to use alarm clock, but if necessary, maybe we'll have some hints from administrators to measure, to show the timer. Welcome, Gary. Hello. I saw you this morning at the Education Center, the same as Alberto. Okay.
Christine.
The same.
Yes, hello, Gary.
Yeah, I heard your speech.
Jan Hans, nice to meet you also. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Gary.
Hi, everyone. The session is 1 hour and a half, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, because...
yes, we extended to 2 hours, Gary.
All right, well,
Yeah, because of 11 speakers, we asked to extend till 2 hours.
Okay. I would like to excuse myself, but at 5 I should move to another session, so I'll leave.
Okay, so we will give you opportunity, just raise your hands for the second question at the beginning. So, well, we can schedule you to be a second speaker after Alberto. What do you think?
Professors, you are live and attendees have started running.
Ahead of time.
What happened?
Okay. We will miss, I believe, Sue Anderson, but
yes, Sue had to cancel. Benno, glad you could join us. Thank you. Hi, Tom.
Thank you. Everything okay? Thank you.
Hi, Benno.
Hi.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag. Where are you from?
Okay.
From Poland? CBGF?
I am from Poland, yeah. I am back in Poland, yeah, after 30 years in US and Japan, yeah. But I was in Vienna. I have nice memories from Vienna. It's a great university, Friedrich Schiller.
Yes. With an incredible historical legacy.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we are still waiting for Thomas. It's late evening, I guess, in Melbourne, if he is there. Okay.
I'm in Germany.
In general, we have participants. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
Hi. I'm in Germany.
Good evening.
Fully awake.
Oh, you are in Germany. So you are in our time zone. Okay. So, Janani. Okay, go ahead.
I think we can begin. I know that Pavel wanted to join us, which I'm very glad, and Olivia is supposed to join us. But we'll begin, and then they can come in at the right time. I'd like to start, first of all, thank you all for joining for this session. This is a little bit different than our other sessions in the sense that we have a specific proposal that we would like to brainstorm with you, and which is directly related to the global leadership in the 21st century project. It's on what happens after this conference, the main conference in October, and our final report to the UN. So we wanted to take advantage of so many knowledgeable people coming to brainstorm about an idea that is part of the project. I'd like to start by giving a brief background about this this subject of a master's course in leadership for global social transformation. In 2013, we conducted our first meeting in collaboration with UNOG on the need for a new paradigm in human development. And sometime around then, we were approached by the United Nations Association from New York saying, "Hi, Olivia, was looking for you. Thanks for joining." We were approached by the UN organization saying that many of our members would like to continue their education in order to acquire greater knowledge for dealing with the complexities that the World Academy is talking about and that we were discussing at the conference. And can we help them with some type of educational programs? And frankly, we were deeply immersed in dealing with the problems and trying to work out solutions, but we weren't at the stage of where we felt we could go and offer such programs. After that, we launched a series of what we called courses. I think it totaled about 15, which were really curriculum development programs within the academy and with a lot of outside collaboration on different facets of the issues we've been studying that we thought would be necessary to come to comprehensive solutions. And that ultimately led us to the second proposal to UNOG, which that is for the Global Leadership in the 21st Century Project. And this conference, the conference that's coming up in October, our final report, which we've agreed to write. And we included in that proposal the idea that as a result of this project, we would come up with some course material that could be used extensively, not only within the UN system, but with national governments, with diplomats, with business leaders, with the heads of NGO organizations, with educators, with engineers and technologists or anyone else. Because we realized the more we were working on it, that there's essential knowledge necessary to understand what's going on in the world today, let alone the processes by which we try to effectuate change in the world. And we were not satisfied with the existing knowledge that's being promoted through existing educational system. So this is the origin of this discussion, and our goal is to come up with those programs in the period after the conference in Geneva and the final report. And I won't go into the subject matter. I hope you've all received the outline. I wanted to just say something about the outline. The purpose of this was to be illustrative, certainly not to be either comprehensive or final. It was written about a year and a half ago, and it was trying to conceptualize what would be the difference in approach that we think is necessary to really prepare ourselves and other people for understanding and acting more effectively on global social issues. And this was the result of our 15 discussions that we held, courses or curriculum development workshops that we held, fascinating learning experiences involving many people from different perspectives, multidisciplinary, rather transdisciplinary. And we realized that there were certain recurring themes, whether we're talking about democracy or global governance or economy or financial systems or ecology or education. And all of these were core subjects of that we've been working on, that there were certain core themes that kept coming back over and over again. And that was, we came to the conclusion that the challenges we face today are very much the result of the way we're thinking and of the type of thinking that's being promulgated through our educational system globally at this time. The very idea of having specialized disciplines that fragment reality into airtight compartments is itself contrary to the reality of the world we live in. The idea that we can talk about economy separate from political science, or separate from ecology, or separate from society, is a mental artifice. It's not a real reality. And a structure of the theory on which our social sciences are based is equally very much compartmentalized, as if we can really isolate the pure economic factors from the social, cultural, political, ecological, and other factors involved. And so the need for integrality in thinking, as well as integrality in theory, because our policies, our institutions are based on the same kind of divisions. So we had two very wonderful programs on the way we think and the evolution of the way we're thinking and the way we need to be thinking differently in the future if we're going to be able to solve these problems. We had programs on our educational system and the way we perpetuate problems by not only the way we've divided reality, but the theoretical framework on which that division is based. And we've been doing work with others on those. We found that whatever the subject we were coming up to, values, the power of values was a core that we could not escape, that the integrating factor for finding solutions that will really be viable was always based on a question of rights, values, and how those ideals get translated into practice in law, in institutions, and in action. We had fascinating discussions on the role of power. And it's ironic that you can go through a whole course in economics without the word power ever being mentioned, because power belongs to politics. But in fact, the role of economy and the role of money in the way the world works, it in fact affects everything. And when we look, the more we looked at power, the more we realized we're talking about the specific capacity of the society to solve its problems and how these capacities are interlinked with each other. So the idea of power to accomplish was a recurring theme. The principle of organization. It was interesting that, that though we all use the word organization all the time, that to really understand the role of organization in society and the way that social organization is evolving and the power that is generated by organization was a recurring theme that seems to permeate all the topics that we were discussing. We're calling these transdisciplinary themes rather than discipline-specific themes. And of course, one of the characteristics of our social sciences is that we have tried to objectify them, tried to normalize them, try to reduce them to quantitative statistics so that we can measure them and be very scientific about them. And yet the more we went into in our discussions, we found that the subjective dimension of reality, whether it's of the individual or the collective, was so powerful, so determinative, that unless we were going to give that a prominence and recognize that the objective expression was the result of subjective perceptions, attitudes, aspirations, and values, we would not be able to understand the process. And I'm just giving these as examples to kind of reflect very briefly the kind of thought processes that we've been exploring within the Academy, not trying to be comprehensive and certainly not trying to do justice to them. I just wanted to frame the way we have conceived of this, the need for this program. So everything from thinking and values to social institutions, social organization, culture, as something that runs through the whole social process. And when we came to the project on global leadership and what this is all about, we finally found ourselves formulating the thought this way. Society has been evolving for centuries. It's been evolving for millennium, of course, but very, very slowly. It's been evolving more rapidly in the last few centuries with increasing speed. And now we are at a point where the speed and the direction of that evolution, which seems to be happening by itself without the conscious volition of humanity as a whole, certainly without the forethought and planning that we, by humanity as a whole, suddenly we're faced with the fact that if it keeps going on without control, without leadership, without much greater forethought and anticipation, that the consequences could be quite devastating and even irreversible. And therefore, what we need is to make this evolution more conscious than it's ever been before. And we need to understand the process, not only of the evolution better, but we have to understand the process by which we can convert a subconscious process where nobody's in charge to a more consciously directed process. And of course, in practice, this is what we're trying to do. The world is trying to do through the SDGs, an unprecedented effort. We've never before had humanity come together and agree to anything in 193 countries, let alone 17 goals and 169 targets. And this is one form of leadership. So the broad topic of our discussion is, what can we do? What can we offer? We're not talking in this session about transforming the whole global educational system. Remus helped us do that in the previous session, so all those problems have been resolved, as far as we're going to do them today anyway. We're taking a much more modest goal. We're asking ourselves, as a result of this project, what knowledge, how could we formulate a systematic knowledge and deliver it? We have talked about a master's course because that was our first thought, but this may have many, many different forms in which it may go. But what we're interested today is not so much the form as actually the content that should go into it, and how we can draw on existing knowledge and get your thoughts and experience on how we might go about it and how we may collaborate with others in doing it more successfully. So with that as an introduction, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I'll hand it over to Zbig.
Thank you very much, Gary. Welcome, everybody. I saw Grażyna join us, and Olivia, excellent. So I'm very pleased to have such great scholars, also some practitioners. As Gary explained the philosophy approach, the need, I want to focus on very practical things as based on my almost 2 years academic experience. And so we believe that it should be a professional, but with high academic standards program, which should be developed in type of evolution. Probably we should start with single courses designed by teams, 2-3 persons, and then put together after evaluations. We have the schedule at the end, but we'll see whether we will have time to discuss it. But the idea is the first year of the program should focus on general issue, to give the common platform for all enrolled students. I mean, mostly practitioners, but anyway, so we'll discuss. And the second year, we'll have advanced courses, starting with capstone, or diploma seminar, or in some cases with the thesis. I mean, in US, we rarely see the thesis, you know, I mean, dissertations. We mostly focus on projects, very often team projects. And then we will have 3 specializations. First, or I don't know, I have a question for administrators, because it would be easier for us if you could put our presentation and then there are some details. Vasugi, if I could help you to put presentations, because I have an open one, but I don't know how to attach it, anyway, in this program. But anyway, I hope we will have the presentation, but you read, all of panelists read our program, so you know. So 3 paces, 3 specialization, mobilizing society for achieving Agenda 2030, with sustainability development goals. And the second would be, we can add to this probably also to participate actively in European or American or whatever Green Deal which is happening. Yeah, thank you. And then specialization oriented on corporate creativity, learning networks, and social innovation. And the third one would be on leadership and individual accomplishment. Next slide, please. Okay, in terms of, next slide, please. Okay, we combined the program into following elements. So the first 15 core modules, as Gary mentioned, we have already practiced discussions. We assume that each of them could be offered for European credits, ECT. These are multidimensional global challenges, untapped resources, engine of global development, anticipated consequences of social awareness, evolution of the technology of social organization, human rights, values and culture, social power, man and social power. Next, please. And then social learning with multiplier effects, individual achievements, social accomplishments, process of social accomplishments, perceptions, thinking, creativity, particularly critical thinking, and higher mental development, process of integration in business, future education, evolution of humanity. Maybe we can expand this with designing, implementing, and evaluating institutions. The next component would be a capstone diploma project or thesis, but we would like to see this as action research. Next, please. And we are assigned 8 credits. And the third part, the third part would contain methodological courses and advanced, as well as electives. So for methodological courses, for sure we need, it's always required for graduate studies anywhere. In advanced economics, introduction to analytical methods, both qualitative and quantitative. And advanced courses. For instance, we presented 2 examples, one designed, designing, implementing, assessing institutions, or the course or examples of electives, project management for sustainability, designed by Grażyna Leśniak-Łebkowska from Warsaw School of Economics, or my course, building a sustainable business organization. And then we also envision this is a professional, assume it will be very practical professional program, but with high academic standards. It could proceed within the PhD track, which could have 3 specialization: diplomatic, public, and business, and civic. Okay, next, please. And so far we have the 4 consortium partners: World Academy, World University Consortium, Person-Centered Approach Institute, led by Alberto, the Mother Service Society in India, and we will select universities which will participate. So this is something what I hope to hear from you, the suggestions. Next slide, please. So now we can move to the panel discussion, and then we have 8 questions. Let's start with the first one, and I would like to invite Alberto Zucconi, the chair of Board of Trustees of World Academy of Art and Science and Secretary General of World University Consortium. Alberto, the floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
Well,
3
in
minutes.
3 minutes, I want to underline what is the most important. I don't think it's such an easy challenge. I think it's a very meaningful challenge and a high risk of failure. In my opinion, will be a failure if we don't think about being transparent of the pedagogy and the social construction that is behind the offering such a course. In other words, no matter what, any course has an embedded pedagogy, and any pedagogy has embedded value. We need, in my opinion, to make that explicit. In other words, we need to walk our talk. Then I think that the student body and the teaching body, I would propose more than a professor and teachers, facilitator on learning. That is not less rigorous. Actually, the research show that you can achieve more than traditional education. And I think we should have equal amount, or as much equal as possible, of women, men, people from different culture, and hear different voice. So it's not going to be a replication of some, tipping. And also the issue of power. The issue of power, I think, is relevant, not about what we're going to talk directly, but how we're going to share power and encourage the emerging of a natural leadership among not this master, of course a master, of course rigorous, but I see much better and much more congruent of what we're saying to create a community of learning where the process is going to be also the product, and we can measure, and not just us from the outside all together. So I think, and I am excited to participate, and when I say participate, I am greedy. I hope I'm going to learn more than I can teach.
Thank you, Alberto. You stick really to 3 minutes. I appreciate. And next, I would like to ask Remus, who had some time constraints, to be sure that we hear your voice. Okay, Remus?
Thank you. Very happy
Are you there? Okay.
Very happy to be able to participate to this session. Gary introduced to me some years ago the idea. Also, the idea was presented briefly to Geneva last year when we had a first meeting with the member states. Let me start in my first intervention with 2 stories. One very short story. One is an opinion of Edward Burney. Edward Burney was a nephew of a very well-known psychologist, and at one moment he said, we have a huge gap between the school and society. In fact, the school is lying. During the classes, we teach our students everything is coherent, everything should be connected, when in fact the life is really incoherent and not necessarily the dot connected. Probably in his discussions with his uncle Freud, he discovered all the time there are conflicts between some components and the way people is thinking and the society. So this is one first story. The second one, for sure, you know Walter Lippmann and John Dewey, the philosopher and the political scientist and the journalist. For almost 3 decades, they debated in the American public opinion, the idea who is supposed to decide when there is an issue in the society. And Walter Lippmann, in a book in 2022, said at one moment, experts should decide, and it's no reason to ask citizens, because in fact, it is a deficit of democracy. Why to ask people about, I don't know, very sophisticated public topics? And Lippmann said it is a deficit of democracy. And for this reason, the technocrats have to come and address this issue. And John Dewey said, okay, I can agree it is a deficit of democracy, but that means we need more democracy. What I want to say with these two aspects, probably our objective is not to establish a master degree. Our objective is, my time is,
okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
1 more minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to conclude, so our objective is not to establish a master degree, just to establish a master degree, but to establish a master degree that will help society, on one hand, to have something between incoherent approach and coherent approach, and on the other hand, to have more democratic approach. And probably in the second round, I'll be able to share with you how I see this master program in order really to have impact, because otherwise there are great master programs in different universities around the world. But the question is how we succeed to penetrate at the level of society and to contribute to give solution in a democratic way.
Thank you, Remus. Mulțumesc. I apologize, I forgot to introduce you. Remus is current rector of National University of Political Sciences and Public Administration in Bucharest, Romania. And he's also was a fellow. Okay, and former Minister of Education in Romania. Thank you. Let's move now to third speaker. I would like to ask Christine, could you share with us your views? Are you there? Christine is a professor of law, European law, and the chair of Jean Monnet Center of Excellence at Geneva University. Yes, please. Your floor.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would like first to thank Gary Jacobs and the World Academy for inviting me to participate in this panel. So I'm very pleased to share with you my experiences and my thought, because as David Chikvaidze probably told some of the board, we are running already for the 4th edition an MEIG program. You can see behind me we have the roll-up, Master of Advanced Studies in European and International Governance. And we are having these in partnership with UNOG, with United Nations Office at Geneva. And it's very, very interesting to listen to what Gary just mentioned in the introduction, because many of the issues that have been raised are in fact what we thought about when we established our Master in European and Global Governance at the University of Geneva. And so, in fact, my thought on how, in order to answer the first question, if I may say it like this, we implemented partially, at least, at the University of Geneva, I will be pleased to work with all of you on your master, on your project. So it's really with continuing with UNO, continuing with the World Academy. So first, I think what is very important, and in my view, and that has put into place in this MEIG program, I think that in order to make an education program, a master program, whatever the name of it, different from what exists, I think the link between academic and professional life is very important. So the bridge between university, between the academic and the Geneva International is very important. And in fact, you have only 3 places where you can really run with this is Vienna, New York, and Geneva, if you really want to have the UN family in it. So this was a very important point for us. Second point is really to prepare, our objective was to prepare either for an international career or to a national career, but dealing with international affairs. And this would equip diplomats, UN officials, NGOs, leaders, etc. So the ideas you have in your paper are taken into consideration. Transdisciplinarity, of course, is a point. What I take for very important, intercultural groups, both in the participants and in the professors, in the academic or practitioners, intergenerations as well. I think passing the message is very important. And our main focus, and I think it's very important in our time of COVID-19 and everything, is the multi-level governance. So really to look at all the objectives of SDGs at multi-level. So we take it at, of course, global, regional. Of course, we focus a bit on European, but not only. We have really a regional approach, and national and local. So it's really, I would say, these are our main focus, a part of practical skills. Practical skills are the basis. So link between academic and professional, and then make the bridge between the two, and the diversity, as I mentioned. But I don't want to take the floor for my first intervention too long, and I can come back with other issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christine. So first of all, sharing with your experiences, and also for your readiness to work with us. So we can learn from you and from your institutions a lot. And thank you for support of this idea. Okay, let's move to the second question. And then I will ask Benno Verlaine. Benno is a professor of the Friedrich Schiller University in Jena, Germany, and he is also UNESCO chair for the understanding sustainability, the area which is very close for me. Okay, Benno, it's your floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hello to everyone. My experience, I tried twice to establish a master program in the direction this program is going. One was linked to the International Year of Global Understanding I invented and directed, and to have such a course at the University of Jena. And the second one was in cooperation with the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Young Leadership. And both have been very exciting projects, but the institutional barriers were very complicated. I mean, I just learned that if you have a hub like Geneva, Vienna, or New York, then maybe these institutional barriers can be softened, at least because you have an organization behind that helps you to overcome university division of labor and the scientific division of labor. So in my view, what the content should be is that we need to overcome nationalistic and regionalistic views of the world, because all of us went through a long time of nationalistic brainwash. Everything is organized nationally, the datas, curriculums, institutions, and so on. So if you want to have a global perspective and just fulfilling the criteria that have been mentioned by the two speakers before me, to have a global perspective and people from everywhere in the world, then we need, first of all, a global vision of the problems we are confronted, because most of them have a global span and the global implications. So that's, in my view, we need to fulfill, such a program has to fulfill 2 points. First, a global perspective, and secondly, a transdisciplinary view that has already been mentioned. And thirdly, not just the global perspective, but the global perspective for local lives, for the local context, how we can engage locally to contribute to the solution of global problem constellations in the world of the biophysical world, as well as the social, cultural, economical respect. So I think the problem then is that we don't have many people that are trained in these perspectives. Most of us have been trained in a discipline and experiences the barriers and the rather narrow boundaries of each of our disciplines, but to overcome them in a perspective is very crucial, but also at the same time, probably very challenging. And of course, we need to address this program also to young people. So we need the engagement of young people. And for this, I think it's very important to not train them too much in the disciplinary manner of the established educational systems. We need to overcome them, as Gary mentioned it in his introduction. And I think these are the 5 main pillars of such a program, with all of them specific challenges we need to overcome.
Thank you, Benno. Vielen Dank. You are such great panelists. So you are so disciplined, you know. Okay, let's move to the second question. And then what issue and knowledge should we examine? I mean, both technical and practical relevance for those seeking to understand social impact in the global, national, and local level. Already, Benno mentioned this issue, so let's expand this. So may I ask Grażyna to contribute? She was also a contributor to this program. We have mentioned 3 major authors, but you know there are many people who contributed. Grażyna was one of them, Rodolfo, and so on. We discussed this earlier. But she is professor of Warsaw School of Economics and ran for 10 years the most successful executive master program from University of Minnesota. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zbig, and nice to see you guys. Beautiful pictures. I'm sorry that we cannot meet in a real life, but the day will come. If you allow us, Zbig, I will address one information referring to the question number 1 and 2. Some of them were already mentioned, but for me it is important. The structure of all the science is extremely complex. It's so much fragmented, and everybody wants to become a leader in a narrow discipline, to become a unique person and to offer something valuable to the public. But it means that we have to change the orientation from orientation towards employability, and our uniqueness serves this purpose, to sustainability. And sustainability and employability are not on the same track of change that we want to introduce. Especially that if we are looking at any track of study, we try to show some general issues, and then everybody wants to become a specialist. And how to combine those narrow skills with the fast promotions. You learn along with your practice and experiences to become leader, to have a broader impact on the population. But it is difficult, you know, how to map all the courses within the concept of sustainability and simultaneously to provide the employability for all the graduates. So I think it's one of the most important perspectives. And the second that Benno mentioned and Remus too, it's that we are speaking about consistency and continuity of interdependent actions. So it's really a very challenging task, how to make consistent something that is independent and tries to be independent, that is different. But what we really have to do, it's creating the map of navigating the analysis from local to global and from global to local. So what are the paths of transition, and from ideas to goals through actions and understanding the trade-offs that we do if we achieve one goal, we have to make some trade-offs and to sacrifice other benefits. So there is no just a genius solution for everybody. That's we will only create good. We are aimed at creating good for the population, for the society, but those paths of transitions are full of perils, and depending on the perspective that you adopt, the path of transition will be different. So it's the second remark. Another thing is what should be protected, like for instance, cultural heritage, that shouldn't be any trade-off. So it's not substitutable. We have to focus a contingent approach to everything. So there are so different contexts of our actions that there is no just one the same situation for every country, every industry or every domain of activity. There is also the issue of strong political support needed to implement proposed ventures and institutions and processes and projects and programs. So without the financial support of somebody, it will be difficult to change something that is well anchored in the existing environment. So we are moving to the third one. It's big.
Yes, let's move to the third one. Yeah, the issue. One okay, unless somebody is raising a hand to add to the second question. Okay, well, let's move to the third one. Yes. And then briefly, Grażyna, if you want.
The third one is not a brief one, unfortunately, because it undermines the value of traditional knowledge and disciplines and ways of teaching. I have in mind the VUCA type of environment, so that is that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So it means that there is no ready-made solutions and tracks for achieving the success. So it requires totally different strategies of learning and teaching that are based rather on curiosity and discovery, that is proposed by Gary and pointed out by Gary in his concept. It always should verify and test the value of existing knowledge. It follows in line with the concept of Glaser and Strauss of the theory, building of the grounded theory, that we have to be skeptical about the values of existing theories, and we have to undermine them, focusing on the specific problems, issues that we want to progress with. And undermining it means that we have to co-create and to verify the existing knowledge.
Speak, I think.
Okay, thank you, Grażyna. We speak to Thomas. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me just say that I wanted to sort of contextualize this venture a little. And in Australia, where I worked and also elsewhere, fee-paying master's programs came into vogue in the 1990s. They grew like mushrooms at that time, and many were of poor quality. They were really just focused on making quick money for universities to make up for government funding cuts at the expense of hapless students who were told at that time they needed further education to keep upgrading their qualifications in a fast-moving workplace. So in that kind of context, I think it's important to provide really high quality. And if that can be done, and I'm sure we can do that, then it'll stand out. And it also has to be unique in some ways, and I think it is conceptually quite unique what is proposed in the draft document, though I have some suggestions. One is, I think that methodology is not given enough attention, because it is what will give learners the unique skills that distinguish them from someone who has not taken the course. Theory and understanding alone, I think, are not enough. And in general, in academic curricula, instruction in applied research methodology is often lacking. It's always the stepchild. But if this is to be an exceptional, exemplary, and high-value course, that issue needs to be addressed. A leader is only as good as her toolkit. And in today's world, I also should add digital design skills should be part of that toolkit. Because, I mean, leaders do not need to be IT experts, but they must know what is possible and what is involved. I also would like to suggest that more attention be given to the objective challenges the world faces today. That means leaders need to know in some depth the science around issues like climate change and where to look for the latest science. So far, most leaders don't really know. They think they know. Some of them talk about the need for urgent action. So they are aware of the problem, but they don't know just how extreme the situation is. It's like Russian roulette, except instead of having one bullet in the 6 chambers, we have 3 now, soon we'll have 4, okay? Then you spin and you pull the trigger. That's what we're doing statistically, but it just doesn't sink in. It's very hard for people to understand that if they don't have really up-to-date science information. And finally, I would recommend mentoring as perhaps the best way to enhance capabilities of leadership trainees. Now, bringing mentors into as as lecturers would be very expensive and perhaps not economically viable. And I would therefore think it's better for learners to work with mentors in a practical context through internships. And I know that students definitely are looking for internships when they choose these courses. They want work experience. They know it boosts their employment chances. So that's another mark of distinction. And finally, mobility. I think it would be good if students spend their time across several campuses in different countries in the one course. So have mobility built in so they get cross-cultural experience. They learn to find their way in a new place and take responsibility for themselves in that way. So there's a bit of built-in travel. That would also be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I saw Gary wanted to, I mean, he's co-moderator. I don't want to monopolize my role. Okay.
I only
Gary.
want Olivia a chance to speak. She was signaling, I thought, and she wasn't getting.
Okay. I'd be delighted to share the floor with Olivia. Olivia, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Gary. I feel ashamed because I actually even prepared a PowerPoint and it has 21 slides, so I don't think I'll fit that in 3 minutes, not with all the endeavor in the world. So I will just start sharing some ideas that cover actually both the 3 questions we are already engaging with, if that's all right. Mainly, I wanted to give some contribution in terms of the core question that you've opened up, which is how to change through education the range of challenges that Gary, as always, so beautifully summarized for us. And I wanted to basically link back to Alberto's initial intervention because I very much share pretty much everything he said. And having read the draft masters, for me, one core issue to discuss is indeed, what is it that we stand for and how clear it needs to be. And I think it needs to be crisp clear, and it is not in the draft. It may presumably because it's a draft, but it can also be a strategy. 99.9% of master courses do not say what they stand for, apart from using those keywords that we all throw into the pile for whatever purpose at whatever season that they stand in. So I think that for challenge one would be can we agree to what it is that we do stand for, and therefore what it is that the masters should stand for, or whatever course we decide is appropriate. And in this, maybe I throw in what, so let's say one issue here is the ethos and the purpose of the endeavor. And my offer here would be to link to the discourses about cultural change, which I thought were in the draft and have been mentioned both explicitly and implicitly by the speakers before me, but that is not terribly clear in the draft as it is. We use a lot the term societal change. I've become almost allergic to that word for the amount of abuse it has received. Cultural change that aims to be life affirming, that aims to be equitable and in favor of regenerative futures. That for me would be an example of something that I would like to say, I stand for this, and the course stands for this. But as you will have noted, I have used purposefully language that is not in the draft, is not commonly used. And this links to, I cannot remember whether I read it in one of the commentaries or someone said it, but I feel that we need to embrace significantly more with the whole discourse of post-development and the whole discourse of ways of knowing, indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, which are currently a bit nuanced and quite absent, I would say, in the draft. And sorry to sound so critical, but it's really just to offer some other ways of thinking about the material. And here I want to offer an example of an existing United Nations experience that Thomas is going to be horrified, but I will quote it anyway. The Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services conceptual framework, which I can show later, but the point here is it's a UN, it's linked to the United Nations Biodiversity Convention efforts. And what it is significantly interesting about it is it puts on paper that there is a Western science and that there is another way of knowing. It puts it in the same graph, and it acknowledges the obvious, of course, but the obvious is so invisible in our education system. And here Gracinia made a beautiful summary of some of the issues, and previous speakers also. I mean, the obstacles to any of the things that we're proposing are huge in standard institutions. So I think I'll leave it to the ethos purpose. I have several other things, but I just wanted to open up with this link.
I think I'd like to just comment here if I could, because Olivia's comments are so important and so relevant. And it makes me laugh a little, because when I look at the draft and I see that the core on which the whole thing is based is not explicitly stated. And I'm wondering how that's possible, because Alberto knows in everything we write, the first thing we're talking is human-centered, value-based. And somehow in writing this draft, I mean, the whole basis, because we've been doing this for 6 years, every course we talk, every idea we talk about is human-centered, value-based sustainability. And you're absolutely right. When I look at the draft, I don't see I don't see it explicit. Maybe because we've been talking to the same people for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very important. I just wanted to reinforce what you said. Absolutely important. And thank you for, we can be blind. Pavel, I think you have something to, please, go ahead.
Can I just add one thing, Gary? Thank you. Very quickly, another thing that struck me in the draft is we seem to embrace complexity in a way that I find problematic, in the sense that it's generally something that is inevitably increasing, and that we need to, if not embrace, we need to engage it and learn to deal with it. There is literally a phrase which is, we should stop resisting to it. Now, whilst this is a huge topic, what I wanted to share here is that, no, I would like to also problematize the complexity. And I would like to suggest afterwards, I can send this material, there is a Canadian scholar on peace studies, Thomas Homer Dixon, who worked on synchronous failures. And his treatment of complexity is incredibly problematized in a way that I think is very important for a course on leadership with this ethos. So that we, and because of what you just said about your work with Alberto, indeed, if to be very simple, hopefully not simplistic, a master's course of this kind would probably have to see itself as addressing two very broad, different types of drivers of change. One relating to everything that is outside the self and the person, which are the institutions, the problems, the sectors, and so on. And the other, which is the person and the psychology, the spirituality, the consciousness. And you touch on both, but perhaps by clarifying that there are these two bodies that are, of course, interdependent, but they're very different targets, normally not treated together in a master's course. That was one of the things that I thought was very powerful in the draft.
Thank you, Olivia. Obrigado. I forgot to introduce you. Maybe international scholar, you see, Gary. And then from now working with Portugal, but also in Italy, in Hong Kong, worldwide. This is why it was very good reminder for us. It was so obvious for us what we are stand for that we forgot to explicitly express. Gary?
Yeah, I'd just like to reply because Olivia's comments are so pertinent and they'll be hard to reconstruct it, but I'm going to do it very briefly and mark it for future discussion because the points are subtle. I think the theme behind the project is not just complexity, but integrality. The integrality is a reality of life. The complexity is something that's developing over time because of our institutional interactions. And but what we're basically arguing for is the integrality has always been there, but we have academically abstracted it and divided it. The complexity is evolving and both need to be addressed. But a topic for further discussion, this is the creative. The second point, and then let's hear from Pavel because he's been very patient. The second point is a little different. You raised the point of the subjective and the objective. And we have spent a lot of time on this in our courses at Dubrovnik. And I would say it a little differently, that there are not really two domains. There is one reality that we have arbitrarily divided and abstracted and tended to focus on the objective and suppress the subjective. And in our discussions on these subjects, even in economics, even in money, let alone in politics and social power and everything, they're really inseparable. So we're trying to get back to the wholeness rather than think of them as two separate things. And incidentally, because you talked about traditional knowledge, I will put on the table the fact, we had two programs on mind, thinking, and creativity. in which these issues came up. The relation of the objective to the subjective, of different ways of knowing and all. And having moved from California to India many years ago, where I really learned from a different culture, the fact that the subjective is there in everything. And it was so different than what I had learned in California at UC Berkeley when we were taught about an objective reality. And this has been a constant discussion in the academy on these programs. So I think I'm just coming back to the last point you made about different ways of knowing. We do need a different way of knowing that's much more synthetic, that takes into account the perspectives. I don't even want to call them cultural specific, but the fact that a lot of what we're taught and teaching is by one cultural bias, which is not the way the whole world views things. It's a very complex issue. But just flagging it for future discussion, not for resolution. Pavel, please.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to breach this line of discussion we have here with a session we had this morning when we discussed education for societal transformation and what should be the different forms of embracing new models of leadership through education. And one of the conclusions from that panel was that we actually need to move to a new model of leadership. The idea of shifting towards leadership that is distributed, that is inclusive, that is spread all across the spectrum of society, that transcends the oppressive models of leadership towards the post-oppressive one, the inclusive one that will be not Eurocentric anymore, will not be anthropocentric anymore, but will be more, let's say, truly global, if we're talking about global transformative leadership. And in that regard, one of the questions that we held in that session was, what if we have to create programs and learning spaces where we don't yet know who are those designated leaders for the world? So in that regard, if this program is in service of the global transformative leadership, what is that role that it can play? And maybe one of the roles that we need to look at is the new epistemology that is required to hold that new model of leadership. So rather than to see this as a space where these designated leaders are preparing, we can see the program as a way of creating the space that enables many more leaders at different levels in different places to step in. So in that regard, we require where academic can play the role. It can play the role to intellectually empower and support this transformative leadership, methodologically develop different tools for these leaders and create certain infrastructure for leaders. And these are three particular roles that where such a program will be required. And if we say we are focusing on epistemology, the ways of knowing that are required for the new model of transformative leadership to happen, we certainly need to look at issues such as social construction of knowledge, non-rational, non-Western ways of knowing, including maybe not only Eastern traditional religious, deeply rooted in Hinduism or Chinese systems of knowledge, but also indigenous way of knowledge. But in addition to that, we need to look at emerging ways of knowing, such as collective intelligence, or data science, artificial intelligence, and to see how we can synthesize those to actually create new ways of knowing for a very complex world, where on one hand, we are able to hold this for humans, but how can we also hold it for all the planet? To be inclusive to non-humans, to other entities, to the planet itself, to other species. What are the tools that support conversation and inclusivity for all entities on this planet to work together to the new model of global governance? And I think that would be, that can become a space to actually ask this kind of questions and to create tools for it. That's, I think, what can be the role of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Spasiba. So John Hans wanted to join us. And so let's focus on questions 3 and 4. In fact, we cover almost all the questions step by step listed on this slide. Go ahead, John Hans.
After that, Janani, please. She's also trying to speak.
Okay, good.
After John.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. I would just like to really amplify and to assess what Pavel, Thomas, and Olivia were saying, because when I look, here we are, and we are talking about leadership. Whose leadership? We are, the majority of us connecting today, we do not represent China. We do not represent Africa. Where is the voice of the Middle East? And I think exactly to the point that you mentioned, Pavel, I think if we want to say that we are truly inclusive, I think we need to make an effort to bring in those voices, because when we take leadership, and I think we can debate and we can articulate and we can look at paradigms, but whose leadership? It all depends from where you stand and how you're going to look at all these different paradigms and theories. And where I would like to ask us to be a little bit more, less focusing on where we sit in terms of universities and the higher diploma, I think we need to look at the dual track. Yes, we can influence the debate, we can contribute to scholarship, but we certainly can facilitate and create debate. Where we can facilitate, it is not going to be an easy discussion, because in reality, what we are going to do is to directly, in a way, challenge the conventional wisdom of so much of the academic practice and how power, it goes straight back from Kant, and how Kant framed the rule of law, natural law versus man-made law. And we are in reality going to challenge that. And I just think the more inclusive we are in the consultation, and that we can include, and this is where I just want to say, Olivia, hats on, because when you said, you know, the objectives is missing, and the way that we can do that is by clearly articulating the learning outcomes, and the learning outcomes can be framed.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Can be framed, 2 seconds, can be framed around the subject knowledge and understanding, but knowing that it is going to be context specific, rather than from a European or from an American or from a XYZ perspective. Then there is the notion of higher order thinking, critical thinking, synthesis, evaluation. That is a critical skill. And then the application of what has been learned. And it comes back to those life skills. I want to push that a little bit further to say it's not about the life skills, but it's going to be about that leadership and professional capital that is going to help the individual to contribute in that transformation that is needed. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, obrigado, Hans-Jörg. I forgot to introduce you. You are coordinator of online learning and educational pillar with UN 8 and with UNITAR, okay, and trade. Thank you.
Zbigniew, if I may, could I comment on that? Because I think it's vital and I have something to say on it.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to say that I totally agree with John Hans, his point about inclusiveness, and that means being truly global, not just speaking for Europe or the West. And as someone who's worked in Asia for the last 30 years, I can only laugh at some of the perspectives that people come up with. They just do not know what's going on there. They just do not know. So we need to, and it's where 2/3 of the economic action is now in the world. It's ridiculous, but it just keeps going. It becomes increasingly embarrassing. But I wanted to say the vital issue, especially if you look at places like Africa, if you want to be inclusive, it becomes a matter of funding. And I think that one of the distinguishing features of this master's course should be that those special people who teach there and the special people who come to learn there are the first group well paid, and the second group should be at a minimum fee or free. They should be selected on merit and with total inclusion. And that means we need external sponsors who fund the institution or provide scholarships. Otherwise, it's not realizable. And I've been thinking about how that could be done. And I think we should tap into the private sector for that and create an institute for that purpose.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas. Let's ask Janani about inclusiveness and her perspective from India to help us to understand better the needs, you know. And as I mentioned at the beginning, to respond also to John Hans, we might offer some of these courses not just for degree, but as free, you know, courses. And then, so I mean, we should be very flexible, you know, in terms of meeting this the demand. Doesn't need to be just the master degree. Okay, Janani, are you with us?
Thank you, Speaker. Yes.
Please.
When we talk about our future course, I believe all that is taught in what we design, it needs to be contextual, relevant, based on life, the students' own lives. When students can relate to what they are learning and know why they are learning what they are learning, it becomes relevant, real. Today, we have many students asking, why do I need to learn this? How am I going to use this? Of what use is this going to be to me, to anybody? That question is not going to arise when they are shown, when they are able to see, to some extent at least, how they're going to be able to use what they're learning, such as, you know, for a greater social benefit. When youngsters see a purpose in what they're being asked to learn and do, they begin to enjoy the process, because learning must be a joy, and it is not one now, not to many youngsters. So we need to link learning to life. There is an abstraction now, a vertical fragmentation between the different subjects, a horizontal fragmentation between the learning and the learner. So we need to bridge this gap so that the students can relate personally and collectively to what they are learning, relate what they are learning to their lives, to the lives of those around, to society. Then that way, I believe education comes alive. And this life can differentiate it from a lot that is being offered to students today. There is a quote from an Indian spiritual book: there is no waste in nature. So for this question that I think you displayed some time back, what knowledge should we focus on? Everything has its value. All that we teach our students, it has its value, but that value is utilized when we show them what what they are learning relates to the world, to them. When you zoom in too close to a picture, you can sometimes see the individual brush strokes. Today, digitally, we do that. When you zoom into a picture on the computer, you see only the pixels, those tiny dots, and that can sometimes hurt your eye when you stare at them for too long. But that is what we are doing with knowledge now. When we separate knowledge into small compartments and give it to our students in pieces. So we need to be able to, show them this complete picture. It's almost like giving them, petal by petal and asking them to imagine the flower. That's not very easy. The reconstruction may not be accurate. Some of our speakers talked about integrated thinking, transdisciplinary thought. Our students, our future leaders, they need to be capable of this integrated thinking, so that they don't adopt a piecemeal approach to solve a complex problem. And that is possible when, through our teaching, through our course, we give them that bigger picture, let them see the whole and how their part fits in. So it enables them to see their role in the world. They're better able to understand social processes when they see the bigger picture, and that understanding empowers them as well to make an impact in society. And specifically in the Indian context, I would just like to add that liberal arts education and flexibility is not something that exists. It's not at all prevalent. It's only in a very few select places. And sometimes the students have to select a course, a set of subjects at the age of 15. And after that, there is not too much flexibility allowed to them. And so I believe in what we do, we need to inculcate that, flexibility, a liberal arts, a greater exposure, so that integrated thinking starts with the way we teach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dani, for your excellent contribution. I should introduce Janani, a senior research as analyst at Mother Service Society, but she is a great spirit of World Academy of Art and Science and helper in many of our programs, including Cadmus edition, conferences, and so thank you very much for your contribution, and we hope for your further contributions. Okay, now we are in fact, focusing on the three questions. I mean, third, fourth, and fifth already. Gary, would you like? I see that you wanted to say something.
Them and you don't. I think we're looking at the same picture, but I see Christine has been wanting to talk. So please, let's give her
for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Gary. I'm just trying to understand, because it's my first participation to this discussion about this program or courses. But what is maybe not clear enough, and I think this join Olivia remark, is what is the audience targeted? Because I have the feeling that some of your comments are made for, I would say, classical students for a first degree, a first master degree, and at the same time you have the objective in the paper of equipping diplomats, UN staff, and NGOs. So I think these are quite different audiences, and of course the observation made by Grazina at the very beginning about transdisciplinarity is different, because if you go for, I would say, more advanced audience, the transdisciplinarity is a plus, is an advantage, because they all have their own profile, they will have their own discipline in the way. So I think the perspective is a bit, of course, different depending on the audience targeted. But this is, I think, this is one first observation. The second one, maybe because it has been raised by many of you, I think what is very important in the content and context discussion is that, for example, the idea, and I think here it's shared by everyone, the idea is to deal with the main challenges we are facing today. So I don't know, take human rights, migration, or peace, security, humanitarian affairs, or trade and development. So I think what is very important and what is missing today in the whole education programs is to look at this topic from different perspectives. Look, if we take human rights, you will look at a different, a global perspective, how it is dealt with at global level, how is it dealt with at regional level, whether it is European, Asian, or South American perspective, but we look at them at regional level, and then we look also at it at national or local level with the same kind of issue, and see what are the challenges for each level in a certain way. And this, I would say, this different perspective can be brought by the professors or speakers or practitioners, but it can be brought also by the cohort of participants, because they will be coming from all around the world and they will bring their own experience. And I think that this combination would, of course, enrich our potential future program, whether it is a master or a specific course. And this is, of course, two different lines that we have to maybe differentiate or distinguish each of or the other. Yeah, this is, Of course, inclusiveness, I fully share. It has to be done at all levels, of course. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, merci, Christina. You touched really the issue of peer learning. If we are creating the community learning, we serve as facilitators. We learn from each other. Everybody has the same rights. So this is the way, you know, we particularly it works at the executive learner, participants, because they bring a lot of knowledge, particularly practical knowledge. If they share, I mean, the learning, the others, you know, and the practical experience, practical cases. So thank you for raising very important issue. This way we are moving to the sixth question, which is about pedagogy and how we are going to deliver. Next slide, please.
We're missing.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Remus would like to speak and Olivia would like to speak. I don't know, Big, are you seeing all of us?
No, I don't see Antonio, for instance. Antonio, are you here? I don't see raised hands, you know. I don't know
Do you
how.
see photos of all of us now in front of you? Don't you see all the images?
Okay, I need to zoom, you know, but yeah.
If you're in the, you shouldn't be in the speaker's view, you should be in the gallery view where you can see all of us.
Okay, yeah.
In the right, the left, the right-hand corner of your screen. But Remus would like to speak and then Olivia would like to speak.
Okay.
The problem to you.
Okay, go ahead, Olivia.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I think.
Hello.
Yes. Is that all right? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to follow
please.
up on Christine's suggestion with an additional provocation, because I really liked her emphasis on the need to tackle the topics that we do tackle, or the challenges, and from different perspectives. And an additional proposition could be to totally and truly embrace something that is rarely done, what I like to call the epistemological humility that we should cultivate, and therefore the embracing of in indigenous and local knowledge, as well as what we broadly call the Western scientific paradigms of knowledge. If we were to bring the language, and therefore also the concepts and the cosmologies that are linked to those words, into these different perspectives, that would be an incredibly powerful way of making the point that nothing is set in stone and that everything is dependent on how and from where you're looking at it. But in particular, I just wanted to say, words matter so much in our world. And even in the draft, there are many words that I would want to be either revisited or accompanied by a certain explanation, scarcity being a good example, yeah? So that was just following on to Christine's point, and then I promise I will not intervene again, but another provocation is, what is it that we want as World Academy? Because is this a course that, to be very blunt, needs to bring some money to us? Or is the purpose to reach as many people as possible with the fundamental messages and ideas and openings that we want to offer? If it is the latter, I think that COVID's period has proved that online teaching is immensely powerful. And I'm a techno contrarian, but there is something there that would, so you could either combine it or offer short courses online, and then, so you got the point. Thank you, sorry.
Thank you, Obrigado, Olivia. Gary?
Well, I'd like to, Remus is next and then Pavel, because they've both been waiting a long time. But just to clarify that, Olivia, from at least, we've not voted on this, but I can say, I mean, we want the knowledge to go to the world. The money, if we need money to execute the process, which not intended as a money-making, revenue-generating program. we need to fund those that are involved. And I agree with you. The least cost, greatest reach is our objective. That's absolutely the intention behind it, and nothing else. It's not a financial scheme to fund the academy at all. Remus and then Pavel, please.
Yeah, I would like also to insist a little bit on, let's say, discussing the topic on different chapters. We focused in our discussion more on content, or how such a program might look like, which is very good, because if we have a good concept, after that we can go to the next steps. And in fact, I can say this because I had more or less the same question as Christine had earlier when we discussed Gary in Bucharest. And I said, okay, who will be we? We are going to do this, because, you know, in academia, there are very clear rules. Just some institutions can organize a master program. You need accreditation, you need a lot of things. And I am from Romania. I am the rector of the Romanian School of Government. So if I want to do something like this, I can do it in 1 year, and it will be a very successful program. But the objective is not this. The objective is to have a program which benefits for more than my wisdom and the wisdom of my professors. So to be a collective wisdom from different perspectives, and this program to have impact at a bigger level than Romania. That means we cannot be CNSPA and a few other people associated with, but to be a consortium of institutions, academic institutions recognized in their regions, having the capacity to reach different experts out of the very distinguished group of 12 people that we are today here, and under the concept of World Academy of Art and Science, and with the support of some institutions, not necessarily academic institutions like UN institution and so on, to be able to offer a model that is accessible, doable. And we started with master program because we had to start with something, but can be an online course of 1 week for someone who doesn't want a master program. So we can go upper or down or on horizontal way. What is important is to have a model more or less agreed, because this model all the time will have a dynamic and a consortium of institutions ready to contribute. So this is, Gary, please correct me, but this is the way I seen the concept when we discussed in Bucharest. Sure, we will need a lot of money, but in order to reach the objectives, this money is not necessary to be in one pocket, could be in the pocket of each individual institution participating. So we are not there for the moment to, let's say, to design the business model of this kind of project. But we do need, first of all, to understand if we really see the need of such an approach. And I see, because in fact, from my opinion, the problem is many times we have some answers, not all answers, in our classrooms, but we are not able to put these answers on the table of people, policymakers, of politicians. So let's try to build this process from learning to really implementing some solutions. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Remus, I can only say there's nothing to correct because I agree with everything you've said. So absolutely nothing to correct. Thank you. Pavel, please.
Yes, thank you. I strongly believe that there has to be a complementarity of ends and means. So if we want this program to be in service of a new model of global leadership, and if we want this program to hold space for new epistemology, that enables global leadership of the different kind, we need to model that in the program. We need to have means, we need to have pedagogy, and we need to have relationship of institutions supporting it that models already the situation that these leaders will step into. So this means that it cannot be purely academic. It has to be a distributed effort that brings academia in partnerships, not only with established 20th century governance institutions, but many emerging institutions, NGOs, movements, companies, startups, acceleration spaces, Second, it has to be very experiential, and it has to be a place where this knowledge is co-constructed, where it's actually built, where data is accumulated, where new principles are practiced. It's not just another program. We have to model a way of being in the program. I agree that it has to use online capacity and spread the word as widely as possible. But more than that, we need to focus on building up the collective knowledge space where by the effort of program participants, knowledge is co-constructed, and each new batch of the program, maybe it's a continuous, we need to discuss this, but it's kind of building up the collective knowledge. It's not just professors distributing to teachers. It's not a banking model, as Paulo Freire would say. It's a co-creation model. So all of these principles have to be there. And I would emphasize very, very much that it has to be about experience, direct experience of human beings as whole human persons. So it has to emphasize all of these aspects. And I think without that, we will be still in the old paradigm, and this will not be a program for global transformative leadership. Thank you.
Great, thank you, thank you. Big, we have had a lot of questions from Anne Schick, who, Adsnick. Anne, can we promote you and hear from Akshay? Can you allow Anne to come on?
Sir, sadly, Anne has left the meeting. I think she joined the next session.
Okay, okay, thank you. Zbig, we have another question. We still have a little time. We're running to the end of the program, but if we can take one more question, or is there anything that somebody would pressingly like to say in response to what we've already discussed? Because we've discussed.
If I may, Gary, I wanted to respond to Pavel because I really agree with what he said. It's really important. And leaders are not the kind of people who need to be told what to do. What they need to learn is how to find out themselves about any information, any knowledge that they need to deal with matters as they arise. And I would therefore recommend keeping the fixed content to a minimum and designing group research tasks that provide self-managed learning experience. It's what they call active or participatory social learning, and all the evidence in pedagogy today shows that it has the most beneficial impact on learner outcomes.
May I? Speak, may I?
Yes, of course, Krasny, please.
Hi, Gary. Thank you. We are in a pretty good situation because if there is no standard for such a program as we are going to create, we have a full freedom. So this is one thing. So we don't need to be too much backward oriented and to look at how other programs were created, because we have to create something new. So if anybody has not experiences, so our focus should be rather on recruiting the best and the most diversified team of people who are interested in the field, who are creative, who are angry for success, so that they have those hungry minds. They want to create something valuable. And the problem is that we don't need to tell them, the whole pedagogy, how they should be taught, because nowadays when I'm looking at how students learn, it is not necessarily our lectures and not books. And personally, I love reading books, but the majority issue, the most important issue in their path of learning, if we refer to young people, is the keywords that they can Google and find what is the variety of opinion sources that they can find in internet, and they are looking at the dates, whether they are contemporary opinions, and nobody looks at the older ones except from historian, of course, because they are always backward oriented, and they have to read the facts from the history and try to find their updates in the new history, and to take up some conclusions, some reflections. But these people will be responsible to co-create. So if we refer to Albert Einstein saying that one who does not investigate the impossible does not make a discovery, and our program should be rather of the discovery type. So they will propose a set of rules and ways how they want to learn, but the capital that that we will be basing on is their erudition, their knowledge, their passion to act, passion to discover, and passion to share. I have some experiences from the program that Zbig mentioned at the beginning when we were introducing the executive MBA program to Poland at the time when there was a very traditional system of education and the MBA standard did not exist. The economy looked totally differently. So the question was, what will be the value of such education? First of all, we had a fantastic partner. So I think that in this community, we can count on very, very important and valuable and prestigious partnerships. So this is already done. And second, that the standard, we will create the standard. So we don't need to look for the existing barriers. If we have the followers, so there is no leaders without followers. And in case of the WEMBA program, there was a number of people who are just curious what type of education we can offer to them, how it will be perceived by potential employers, or what businesses or what types of activities or institutions they could set up by themselves. And it really worked very well. So the standard after some time was accepted because there was a number of employers who want to pick them up immediately after graduation. And those people show the immense portion of activity and propensity to change the existing practices in business. So we still have contacts, and I see that this is the power of good examples. So if you create something valuable and if you have those followers, then you don't need to take care about other barriers, how they refer to existing curricula or to institutions, restrictions, and so on. So I'm very, very much optimistic about this new proposal because it's different and people are looking for something that makes them different and allow them to be the leaders and just differentiating from the masses. So this is something that is needed. And I also want to point out that sustainability is much more popular in the younger generation. They are very sensitive to those issues. They want to have the safe future and they don't want to leave all this future to those who now set up the rules. They want to set up their own rules. And the situation is that we don't know what will happen, like happened here with the COVID-19, because there is a lot of unknowns. So you don't know what will happen. So if we do not create the patterns of behavior that are aimed at discovery, aimed at cooperation, aimed at sharing what you already know with others who know something else, and mixing this knowledge and convincing each other about the value of some parts of thinking, so there will be no value of the program. So this confrontation of different aspects is, I think, the most valuable component of this model of teaching. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this, Rosna. It goes very deeply with what I feel also. that what the world needs today is not more, the specialist that has become the standard is no longer the uniqueness. The person who understands the wider context is the person who has something unique today and an invaluable perspective. Just an anecdote to illustrate this. I had a young woman who worked with us in India for a year. She was a computer scientist working at a big international company, and she was bored and she left it. And she spent 1 year studying issues like this, broadly speaking, and the same company hired her back at twice the salary. not to do the customized specific work that she had been doing, but to train others to how to think out of the box and to solve problems and innovate and look at new opportunities. So I think it's a very exciting possibility, and thank you for what you said. I think that we've used up our time. Anybody with an urgent press, I want to thank you all for rich discussion. Janani.
Just a very, very brief comment. We need to liberate learning from the forms of evaluation and accreditation that we have designed and largely use today, not the traditional tests and exams and the grading of students based on what they write in 2 or 3 hours, as is the case in India and many parts of the world as well. So we can adopt a way of evaluation that reinforces learning. There are several best practices already that we have studied as part of our endeavor to design the future education in the World Academy and the World University Consortium. So we can revisit these and adopt the best of these practices in what we offer. Thank you.
Yes, John Hans, please. Unmute yourself, please. Unmute. Can you unmute?
Just to build on what Jenny was saying is, and I think this is also important that because we talk about online, but I think there also needs to be a discussion how much of the program content. Oh dear.
Well, go ahead, we hear you.
It needs, will be asynchronous and synchronous. And should we not also look at the potential of micro-learning using mobile technology? Because again, if we look at the Middle East and China, the individuals that we are hopefully going to be identifying will not necessarily have the time to spend a year sitting in a class, or so that flexibility of the engagement is really important. And it's again how we facilitate that learning. And I think in parallel to the point that Thomas had mentioned, maybe it's also important that we start looking at funding mechanisms, because that's always the area, and the work that I do in creating, designing and delivering these online master programs for the United Nations Institute of Training and Research, that can very quickly become your Achilles heel. So it's really important to have those financial partnerships to ensure that you're in a comfortable position, and the way you can then offer these programs in a sustainable way. That's the only contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else? Spig, would you like to close the meeting then? I think we've had a wonderful discussion, very useful discussion.
Thank you very much for bringing so many interesting issues and enriching this. And I also appreciate that everybody participating in the discussion presented her commitment to work with us, which is very important. We want to expand the number of people involved. And then many inspiring comments. We need to digest it. We will prepare the new version. We will circulate with you to have this collective intellectual product. And then you will see we have the schedule of preparation, but I don't want to take more of your time because we are competing with some other session. And you are a wonderful participant, creative, and then I see the energy for something really new, something which does not exist. So there's new challenge. And Pavel mentioned, look, we have such new challenges. We need to have a new product to empower people to change, to deal with constant change, with complex system. So thank you very much, everybody, and looking forward to see you in working on the next stage. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.